you cold. According to the American Cancer Society, about 40% of men and women will be diagnosed with cancer at some point during their lifetimes. That is a staggering number. It's nearly half of us.
It really is. And when you hear that word, cancer, it almost always triggers this immediate visceral response, fear, panic, a sense of an ending.
Right. We immediately go to the battle metaphors, fighting it, beating it, the war on cancer. But today we're looking at a conversation that completely flips that script. We're discussing the story of Dr. Robin Timsoe, an acupuncturist and spiritual practitioner who faced a stage 4 lung cancer, a terminal diagnosis, and didn't just survive it, but used it to fundamentally simplify his entire existence.
And that's the key word here, simplify. Dr. So's journey, which was detailed in a recent interview on the Enthusiastically Spiritual podcast, isn't just about medical treatments. It's about this radical idea that illness can sometimes be an exit plan we subconsciously create because we're tired of the complexity of modern life.
That is a heavy concept. The idea that we might subconsciously check out. I want to dig into that, but first, let's set the scene. Who is Dr. Robin Timsoe?
So Robin Timsoe is an Australian practitioner with over 4 decades of experience in acupuncture and Eastern medicine. He actually mentions being one of the first registered acupuncturists in Australia. His registration number was literally 49. He's been in the healing arts for a very long time, working with high-profile clients, including George Harrison of the Beatles at one point.
Wait, George Harrison. That's a serious claim to fame.
It is. But what's interesting is how he frames it. He talks about feeling the soul connection of someone who had touched so many people. But despite all this spiritual knowledge and decades of healing others, he hits a wall in his early 60s. He's approaching his 63rd birthday, feeling bored, perhaps a bit disillusioned with the grind. And then, boom, stage 4 non-small cell lung cancer.
Stage 4. That's usually the end of the line in conventional narratives. And this is where the story takes a turn that I think will challenge a lot of listeners. He didn't just rush into chemotherapy, right?
No, he didn't. And we need to be careful here because he did use Western medicine, specifically immunotherapy, but his mindset was different. He describes lying in the hospital bed, staring at the ceiling, and realizing he had a choice. He calls it an exit plan. He believed that, on a soul level, he had created an opportunity to leave because he was done with the heaviness of his life.
Okay, I have to play devil's advocate here. That sounds incredibly provocative, maybe even dangerous to some people. Telling a cancer patient they created their illness as an exit plan, that sounds like victim blaming, wrapped in spiritual language. How do we reconcile that?
It's a valid critique, and it's one that often comes up in New Age circles. The idea that we create our reality can feel cruel when reality is a tumor, but Dr. So frames it less about blame and more about agency. He's not saying you committed a sin and got punished. He's suggesting that our biological systems respond to our deep subconscious resignation. If we are constantly stressed, unhappy, or feeling like life is a burden, our immune system, which fights cancer cells every single day, might just downregulate. It might stop fighting as hard.
So it's less about I manifested a tumor with my mind and more about my chronic state of stress and lack of purpose created an environment where cancer could thrive.
Exactly. That's the nuance. Science actually backs the stress component. We know that chronic stress floods the body with cortisol, which suppresses the immune system. Dr. So's perspective is that he had to decide to stay. He had to consciously choose life, not just fear death. He says many people don't want to die, but they also aren't fully committed to living. There's a massive difference.
That distinction is fascinating. Not wanting to die versus wanting to live. One is moving away from fear, the other is moving towards something. So once he decided to stay, what did he actually do? You mentioned simplicity.
Right. He adopted what he calls the KISS method, keep it simple, stupid. He radically simplified his life. He stopped working afternoons. He focused on nature. He aligned his schedule with the circadian rhythm, waking with the sun, winding down when it sets. He basically stripped away everything that was artificial or draining.
It sounds lovely, but also Expensive? I mean, checking out of the rat race to align with the sun is a privilege not everyone has. If you're working 2 shifts to pay rent, you can't exactly just decide to simplify your schedule.
That is absolutely true, and it's a tension in the wellness industry generally. However, Dr. So's point is also about internal simplicity. It's about stopping the mental churning. He talks about releasing suppressed emotions. He shares this vivid moment during a fast on day 9 where he woke up and felt a massive emotional release. He realized he was carrying old baggage that was literally weighing him down. You don't necessarily need money to process your emotions, though therapy certainly helps.
Fair point. The internal clutter is often just as toxic as the external schedule. Let's talk about the medical side again. He mentions immunotherapy. For those who don't know, how does that differ from the traditional slash and burn of chemo and radiation?
Great question. Traditional chemotherapy attacks rapidly dividing cells. It kills the cancer, but it also kills hair follicles, stomach lining, and immune cells. It's poison, essentially. Immunotherapy is different. It teaches your own immune system to recognize and attack the cancer cells. It's essentially removing the camouflage that cancer uses to hide.
Which aligns perfectly with his philosophy, doesn't it? If his theory is that his body gave up, immunotherapy is basically a pep talk for the immune system. It's saying, hey, wake up, we have work to do.
Precisely. It's working with the body's intelligence rather than bombing it. And he combined this with fasting and deep emotional work. He mentions that after 2 years of treatment, the tumor had reduced by 30% and stabilized. In the world of stage 4 lung cancers, stable is a massive victory. He's now years past his diagnosis, living essentially symptom-free.
He calls himself a cancer coach now. What does that actually look like? Is he telling people to stop their chemo?
No, and he's very careful about that. He doesn't tell people to reject Western medicine. In fact, he criticizes the binary of Western versus Eastern. He uses AI, ChatGPT specifically, to analyze medical reports for his clients. He's very modern in that sense, but his coaching focuses on the why. He asks clients, why did you create this? And what is your purpose for staying? He believes that if you don't have a compelling reason to be here, a North Star, the medical treatments will only do so much.
That brings us back to the psychological aspect. He mentioned something about liking and disliking being a trap. What did he mean by that?
He suggests that we get caught up in our preferences and our comforts. I like this food. I don't like this exercise. I like my stress because it makes me feel important. Cancer, he says, is discerning but indifferent. It doesn't care about your preferences. To heal, you often have to do things you don't like, whether that's a strict diet, facing a painful memory, or changing your job. You have to step out of the comfort zone of your personality.
It's the death of the ego in a way. The ego wants comfort. The soul, arguably, wants growth. And sometimes growth is terrifying.
Exactly. And speaking of growth, he has this interesting take on why souls are here. He references the idea of rainbow children, a concept from New Age spirituality about generations of souls coming to Earth to break paradigms. He identifies with that group, born in the late 50s, here to challenge injustice. It frames his cancer not just as a personal trial, but as part of a larger spiritual mission to understand healing.
That contextualizes his whole life. If you believe you're here on a mission, then an illness isn't just a random accident, it's a plot twist. It's a challenge to be overcome so you can teach others. It adds meaning to the suffering. And Viktor Frankl taught us that meaning is essential for survival.
Right. He who has a why to live can bear almost any how. Dr. So's why became teaching others that they aren't victims of their biology. He's very big on autonomy. He says doctors and oncologists are well-meaning but indoctrinated. They operate within a box of statistics. He refused to be a statistic.
I want to touch on the competition aspect he brought up. He mentioned that isolation and competition are driving us sick. We live in these little boxes, separated from our tribe. How does that connect to physical health?
It's profound. We are social primates. We evolved to co-regulate. When we are isolated, our nervous systems stay in a state of hypervigilance. We don't feel safe. Chronic lack of safety equals inflammation. Inflammation equals disease. Dr. So argues that part of healing is reconnecting, not just with people, but with a sense of unity. He mentions how he used to be competitive in his practice, wanting to be the best healer. He had to let that go. Now he just wants to be of service.
It's shifting from doing to being, which is such a cliche in spiritual circles. But when you're facing stage 4 cancer, it becomes very literal. You might not be able to do much, so you have to master being.
And that mastery of being made him softer. He talks about how he used to be harder, more protective. Now he feels things deeply. He mentioned seeing a dog get hit by a car recently and how it triggered old trauma, but instead of blocking it, he processed it. He allowed himself to be sensitive. He sees that sensitivity not as a weakness, but as a return to his true nature.
That's a powerful reframing of masculinity, too, especially for a man of his generation. Admitting that softness is actually resilience. I do wonder, though, about the limits of this. Is there a danger in telling people that if they just find their purpose and release their emotions, they'll be cured? Because we know that sometimes wonderful, enlightened, purposeful people still die of cancer.
That is the critical tension, and Dr. So acknowledges that there is no cure in the absolute sense. He says he could be dethroned at any moment. He knows the cancer could come back. His goal isn't immortality, it's extending quality of life and living without fear. He mentions aiming for 120 years old, which is optimistic, but the core of his message isn't, I have defeated death forever. It's, I am no longer dying while I am alive.
I am no longer dying while I am alive. That's the bumper sticker right there. It reminds me of the Stoics, memento mori. Remember you will die, so live now. But Dr. So adds a layer of, remember you will die, so stop making yourself sick, trying to live a life you hate.
Spot on. He talks about the exit plan again here. If you hate your job, your marriage is dead, and you're lonely, your body listens to that. He's asking us to audit our lives before we get the diagnosis. Do you actually like your life? If not, change it now. Don't wait for the tumor to force the issue.
It's preventative spirituality. We talk about preventative medicine, eat your kale, go for a run, but we rarely talk about preventative satisfaction. Are you satisfied with your existence? Because if you're not, that's a health risk.
And he uses technology to support this. He mentions that he's optimistic about AI and the future of medicine, possibly extending our telomeres, the caps on our DNA that determine aging. He's not a Luddite rejecting the modern world. He's a synthesizer. He wants the best of ancient wisdom, acupuncture, meditation, fasting, and the best of modern tech, immunotherapy, AI analysis. It's a hybrid approach.
That hybrid approach feels like the future of health. We've spent a century diving deep into the materialist view, molecules, surgery, chemistry. Now we're swinging back to the energetic and psychological. The sweet spot is obviously in the middle.
Absolutely. And Dr. So's story is a case study in that middle ground. He didn't meditate his tumor away in a cave. He used science, but he also didn't rely solely on the doctors to save him. He took ownership. That's the takeaway. Agency. You are the CEO of your own health.
CEO of your own health. I like that. But CEOs also have boards of directors. Dr. So had his medical team, but he also had his spiritual intuition. He mentions trusting his sixth sense. He tells a story about dropping a knife and moving his foot before he even consciously registered it falling. He believes that same intuition guides us through major life crises if we listen.
Yes, and that requires quiet. You can't hear that sixth sense if you have Netflix on, the radio blaring, and you're scrolling TikTok. Simplicity creates the silence where intuition speaks. That's why he's so adamant about the simple life. It's not just an aesthetic choice, it's a survival strategy.
So, if a listener is sitting there, healthy, but stressed, maybe feeling that grind Dr. So described, what is the immediate takeaway? They can't all move to the Gold Coast of Australia and treat George Harrison.
The takeaway is the audit. Look at your life. Where are you complicit in your own misery? Where are you carrying suppressed emotion? And most importantly, do you have a purpose that gets you out of bed? Dr. So suggests we need to be enthusiastic about our journey. The word enthusiastic comes from the Greek entheos, meaning God within. It's about channeling that inner vitality.
That's beautiful. Connecting enthusiasm to the divine. It frames joy not as a luxury, but as a spiritual necessity.
It really does. And his final advice to the listeners was simple. Don't be fearful. Fear contracts. Healing expands. Even when faced with the worst news imaginable, panic is the enemy.
take a breath, simplify, take one step. It's advice that applies whether you're fighting cancer or just fighting a bad Tuesday.
It's a story of resilience that goes beyond the physical. It challenges us to look at the interface between our minds, our bodies, and our souls. Dr. Robin Timso is living proof that sometimes the way out is actually the way in.
Couldn't have said it better. It's a reminder that we are far more powerful than we give ourselves credit for.
Absolutely. If you found this conversation valuable, if it made you think about your own exit plans or how you might simplify your life, send this episode to a friend who needs a little perspective shift today.